Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of the Social Jello with Angelo podcast. Today I have a full panel. You saw the thumbnail, top 5 books for martial arts. So on our panel today, we have Anthony Mealy coming out of Massachusetts, who's a Kajikemo black belt. We have Carlos De La Valle. Oh, he's also more about Anthony Tony. He's running Lone Wolf MMA out there in Massachusetts. Did I say that right? Lone Wolf MMA?
Or martial arts, Lone Wolf Martial Arts.
Okay, all right. And then we have Carlos De La Valle coming out of the East Coast in New York, who's a Kajikemo black belt and also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and coach and instructor. And then we have Timothy Bruce, who's a Kajikemo black belt coming out of the Karazempo branch in Wisconsin, recently moved. And finally, we have Claude Lawson coming out of DC area, Maryland. And he's also a Kajikemo black belt and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And I think that's it. There you go. So now we have everyone's background out there. Oh, and me. Hi, this is your first episode. My name's Angelo. I'm a podcast host. I'm also a co-host of I should probably give a shameless plug. Check out the show every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. On Wednesdays at 5 o'clock, you can ask questions to a UFC coach, my good friend John Hackelman, on the Live Clean and Fight Dirty show. If you want to check that out, every Wednesday, you can ask him there. I'm sure he'd be more than appreciative to answer your questions. And for those of you who came from that show to this to watch this, hey, thanks for joining us. I'm a Kajikemo black belt and also an MMA coach, and I'm coming out of Japan. Originally, West Coast, San Diego, but I've been living in Japan now for 10 years, and that's where, as you saw in the introduction, this podcast is broadcasted from. All right, so our top 5, got to give credit to Carlos. This was his topic idea. He said we should talk about the top 5 martial arts books that we all picked. And because of that, I'm just going to hand this over to Carlos. What are your top 5 books, Carlos?
Okay, so I asked a lot of people about this, yourself included, Angelo, and 2 books that everybody, the majority mentioned were the Book of 5 Rings and The Art of War. I guess everybody has those books in their reading selection. I guess if you're into martial arts, those are books that you're going to read, period. I went a different route because I like to read about, psychology, philosophy, leadership, and all that stuff. So one of the first books that I think is important, it's a small book, is by Gregory Jantz, PhD, is How to Deal with Toxic People. All right. It shows you, it talks about different types of people that are toxic: the deceiver, the gaslighter, the guilter, the control freak, and the put down artist. And in the martial arts world, we all deal with these people. All right, especially when you start getting at a higher level. Unfortunately, it's ridiculous, but and we deal with these people on our daily lives anyway. So it should be, it's a good book. It's small. Pick it up and just give it a read. So, when you encounter these people, it tells you, oh, and you could put them in a category, be like, oh, this is what I'm dealing with right now. Right? Because they'll make you look crazy when you're not. Right? The next book that I recommend that's very motivating, they also have an audio book for it, is, of course, by David Goggins. All right? Where is it? All right? You Can't Hurt Me. If you want motivation, if you want to get up in the morning, do what you got to do, run 3,000 miles with 2,000 pounds on your back, that's the book to read. It's very, very motivating. All right, that's all you need. Just get the audio book, put it on.
Don't let Angelo read it.
It's no joke. Oh yeah, Angelo's always doing his triathlon things and all that.
Don't even tell him about it. Angelo, close your ears.
I'm already looking up back facts for millions of pounds on Amazon as we speak.
Yeah. He's like the real Batman. Yeah. So the next book that I picked is called The Unthinkable by Amanda Ripley. All right, and what it talks about, can you see it? There you go, The Unthinkable. All right, and what it talks about is basically and the whole title of the book is The Unthinkable: Who Survives When Disaster Strikes and Why. It talks about situations like 9/11. There were a lot of warning signs. People didn't take those warning signs into consideration. In 1993, before 2001, the 2001 attack, they actually did a test run in the World Trade Center. Right, there was a van that ran, went through and exploded, did damage, but they wanted to see how we would react, and you saw what happened. We didn't do much. Right, it happened, they took care of it, and out of the news to the big event happening, in 2001, 9/11. And so it talks about those issues and what we could do to be more alert. All right. So as martial artists, we should have all those things, in our mind all the time. And when you go to a theater, see where the exits are. When you go to a restaurant, if you're facing the door, see who's coming in. You should always be aware. My son just started going to college. I told him, do yourself a favor. Walk through the whole building. Make sure you know where the exits are, where you could escape to, in case an active shooter comes. You have to know these things. The next book is from Tim Larkin, and one of my teachers, my Kajukemo teachers, Senior Grandmaster Aja Carroll, gave me this as part of my homework. It's called, there you go. All right. It's called When Violence is the Answer, Learning How to Do What It Takes When Your Life is at Stake. So in the United States, there's this big thing where they basically teach us how to be the victim, right? You see it in school with kids. If the bully hits you, they tell you don't fight back because you're going to get in trouble. And that's the victim mentality. So in this book, it tells you, when is it right to use violence, right? We teach self-defense, but sometimes we have to teach self-offense, because if you wait for that person to hit you first, it might be the last time you're going to be standing up, right? I know a lot of people. I live in New York. I grew up in the South Bronx, Brooklyn, and the Lower East Side of Manhattan when it was hell to live in, okay? There's a lot of people that just know how to fight naturally, and they will come up to you and they will knock you out, okay? You have to know how to be ready for these situations. All right, it's no joke. So is violence really something to steer away from, or do you use it to your advantage? All right, so we have to be aware and know, when violence is the answer. My last book is actually two of them that go together. It's called, let me see if you can see it over here. It's called You, okay, from Dr. Oz. Okay, and he has a few books out. Basically, that one's the owner's manual, and this one is You, How to Stay Young. And it basically tells you how to take care of your body. All right, from nutrition, how to identify things that go wrong with you, how to fix them. Right, it'll give you signs of, talk about a stroke, early warning signs, obesity, exercising. It tells you about you, the name of the book, how to take care of yourself. So if you guys see, I went a different route with my selection of books. All these things are part of martial arts. They're just not, martial arts books, but you should know, for example, your egress routes when there's danger. You should know how to respond to a active shooter event. All right. You should know how to deal with people that are toxic. All right. You should learn how to wake up in the morning and be motivated like David Goggins and run 10 miles. Right? You should know where all the exits are in a building. All right, and you should know how to take care of yourself. So all these things are, my 5 books. Right? I think everybody should be aware of all these things.
All right. Next, like I said, we're gonna get straight to it with the list, and then we'll start discussing about a little more in depth about why some of the books are the same, sometimes not. Next up, let's go ahead and throw in it's random rules. We'll throw in Claude. Go for it. Top 5.
Okay. Well, he actually mentioned 2 of the books that, because like I said, I started martial arts back in 1975. So the Book of 5 Rings and Sun Tzu, The Art of War, were 2 of the main books when I really started understanding what martial arts was something that molded my mindset as far as strategy, being aware of your surroundings, who's your enemy, being able to identify people's weaknesses, not only just physically, but you can size someone up with a short discussion using the art of war. You know, so many different philosophies in that book fit into businesses used to use them. Large corporations used to use that book when negotiating. Musashi's book of Five Rings, as far as mind games when it comes to battle and certain things like that, you can outthink someone and you can frustrate people, and a lot of times you can get yourself out of certain situations without having to throw a punch. It's learning yourself and learning your strengths and pitting them against someone else's weaknesses, so to speak. But there's so much more with combat strategies that he used also. Those are two of my first books. The second one, I guess something else was old, is the Tao Jeet Kune Do. Bruce Lee and all that good stuff was a big motivator for me in martial arts, especially coming from my father. So some of the strategies, though old now, still ring true when it comes to combat. And using your strongest weapon, keeping your strongest weapon forward, striking high, middle, and low targets, not just thinking about how martial arts was at one point. It just opened my mind in a lot of different ways of how to think about the martial arts as a whole. The two last books were kind of things that led me down a different path as far as my training. I was already boxing. I was already kickboxing competitively at one point. And there was a book called Inshin Karate, Life in the Inner Circle, by, hope I say his name right, by Joko Ninomiya. Come from Shotokan. No punches to the face, of course, but how they work the body outside and manipulating the person's body through grabbing the clothes and so on and so forth, and joint manipulation, and actually guiding the person into a strike.
What's the name of the book again?
Brute force. I'm sorry, say again.
What's the name of the book again?
Inshin, Enshin, Life in the Inner Circle. Inshin Karate is what the system is called. And yeah, it was just beautiful. Leverage. Made me think about forms a little differently too, as far as doing traditionals versus fighting type forms. Because to me, anything that you're doing in repetition in more than a 2 or 3 movement pattern is a kata in some way, shape, or form. A lot of people would disagree, but I understand. And the last book, having taken Jujitsu since 1994, when Eddie Bravo came out with the rubber guard, I kind of wanted to get a heads up with it, but nobody really knew anything about it. He bought it, what is that, rubber guard, Jiu-Jitsu Unleashed or something like that. And, just gave me some ideas of the basics of the rubber guard and how to think of Jiu-Jitsu a little bit differently. Because what Jiu-Jitsu is today versus what Jiu-Jitsu was when I first started, it just aided in my journey, and I just explored it. I'm not extremely hip flexible, but understanding some of those principles, because it's just a little bit different way of thinking of certain things. Mm-hmm. And the lockdown for a period of time was kind of I don't want to say revolutionary, but it was something that people had to learn how to deal with. I forgot mission control and some of the other techniques. So those are 5 of the books that there's so many more that I could name. But those are 5 of the ones that actually helped me as far as me developing and becoming a better martial arts in that area. The military, as far as you were saying, I was in the military for 26 years, so you are 100% correct about knowing your entrance and your exits. And whenever I walk into the place, you need to know, I look at everybody, I canvass the entire room before I sit down, and I know who I feel like could fight, who may be a problem, to even who would I have to guide out and protect, depending on besides, who I may be with at the time. So beautiful. I enjoyed your selection for books.
When he was talking about the university, I wasn't in the military. I'm just crazy. I'm just mentally unstable and brought up in a very violent neighborhood. So when I went to my university, I was walking around looking at the exits, always looking at how I would jam a door during an active shooter situation. Whenever I walked into a classroom, I started looking around for like heavy desks. What can I pick up? How can I barricade? If I had to run, how's the fire exit work? Is it stairs? Where is the fire exit? These are things that just always, and then
No,
the
that's
canvassing the room
perfect.
was like, because just, I mean, like, just a classic example of where I was brought up. There was a small taco shop, and there was known drive-by shootings in my neighborhood. Like, it was a weekly thing. So every time I walk into my taco shop, I'd always check when I'd walk in, because it's a glass, like open glass. You can clearly see inside, and it's been shot at several times. Several people got shot at the taco shop because a rival gang would be driving by, and they'd see someone they don't like in the taco shop, and you're just having a taco. You're like, I'm not having a gang, but they'll shoot up a place. So every time I walked in, I was always looking at the back entrance to see if they had the back door open. They usually did, but I'd always check if the back door was open so that if something happened, I can run into the kitchen and run out the back door. So, like, again, not a military background, just
Were the
Also,
tacos
check to see if
good?
the door is propped open before you get there. Somebody may be coming in.
So either way, you mentioned real quick before we move on to the next list of books, you were saying Karate in the Inner Circle by, was that
Ancient Karate, Life in the Inner Circle.
ancient? You said ancient karate?
Enshin, Enshin.
Okay, ancient karate, life in the Inner Circle.
Yeah, Joko Nanomiya. I think I'm saying his name
Let me see.
correctly.
Because I found, shoot, I just saw it. I was just looking at it. You said Joko. Okay, yeah. All right, I found it here. I'm gonna
Okay.
because the what I found online. I just want to show everyone. Now we're gonna see our backgrounds real quick. That's all good. What I found online was this one
That's the
by
document.
Joko.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mhm.
Is that the
That's
one?
the guy. That's not the book, but yeah,
That's
that's the
not the
guy.
book. Oh, okay, that's the guy, but that's not the book. All right. Well, I messed it up already. Either way,
All right.
I couldn't find it. That's what I was trying to get at. I
It's
was
the
trying
first
to.
book I think he put out.
Oh, okay. All right. But that was the right author. Okay.
Yeah, the Sabaki challenge was no joke.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Sabaki Challenge. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was back when that came out. That was brutal. That's when you really
Brutal.
displayed what you had. Oh
Yeah.
my
Those
God,
got
that
full
was no joke.
contact.
That was
It was amazing.
I think that was more brutal than karate combat.
Yeah.
That was
That's what
no joke.
drew me to it, because it was one, he had won the All Japan Open Karate Championship, the full contact. He won it, and then I won't say he thought he saw some weaknesses or what have you, but he just saw a better way to do that, to work with what he had learned, and came
Right.
up with Inshin, and it just opened my eyes. I was like, yes, because I had boxed, I had kickboxed, but doing all those things, I know how I have manipulated shoulders, moving around arms, moving the elbow over to set up a shot or what have you, but just straight driving the clothes and using it a circle motion for leverage. It just, at the time frame, it opened my eyes to a lot of different ways of
Good stuff.
applying
Real good
techniques
stuff.
in combat. Say again?
It was good stuff. That was good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time finding it. I keep finding my journey in karate, like his story, but I can't find that title Inshin. That's where I'm stuck. But if you find it later, or if while someone else is talking, you find like a copy of it, let me know, because I'm having a hard time finding it online.
I'll send you. I have it at the house. I'll send you a copy as soon as I get back if you want.
Okay, all right, cool.
Or do you want it now? You want it now?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you have it, or if you can find it online or something that I can see, let me know. That's all I'm gonna say. No rush. And then while you're doing that, I'm gonna move on to, we'll go to Tim. Tim, what's your top 5 books?
All right, so my first one is probably one of the oldest ones I ever got, and This is Karate by Oyama. So it was basically just a Kyokushin Bible. It was a solid stack of a book. Is essentially a textbook. And to me, the reason why it was so important to me is because it was my downtime option to train, my downtime option to keep getting information. Because the dial-up didn't pull up things very fast, and when I lived down the sticks, we didn't even have that much. So having something like that, This is Karate, gave me another training vessel from when I was not at the gym. My second one would be Defendu, which is a 1930s combatives guide. And
That's a good book.
Yeah. It was written by a guy named W.E. Fairbairn, who he pretty much created the concept of SWAT in Shanghai and in the world in general. But it was just a straight guide to attacking real quick and getting out of bad situations. And to me, what I really liked about that is it was the first time someone displayed martial arts as not trying to be artistic in any fashion. It was just hit the guy 1 or 2, 3 different ways and get out of the situation. Claude already touched on my third one, which is the Tao Jeet Kune Do. And that book, you know, modernly gets a little bit of flack because there's a lot of things that were found to be plagiarized. But when you go a little deeper, you see that all the things that were plagiarized were great sources of information either way. So you can look at it like an encyclopedia. Like there's a lot of Jack Dempsey quotes throughout there. There's a lot of catch wrestling quotes throughout there. So whether or not it was all straight Jeet Kune Do or not, it's still great information to have. There's a lot of judo to be found in there and savate. So either way, it's like a one-stop source for martial arts information. My fourth one is Bartitsu compendium. So Bartitsu was a 1890s MMA from England put together by this dude that traveled abroad and went to Japan and whatnot. But to me, the thing that I really liked about it is he's the oldest source I can find where he's talking about if you're fighting a boxing man, use judo. If you're fighting a judo man, use wrestling. And if you're fighting a wrestler, try boxing or savate. Go the different route. And if you're fighting someone you can't handle at all, that's why you carry your stick. That's why you have your coat, your hat, your items that's going to equalize the force in that situation. You know, he even has parts in his book about using bicycles because, you know, you'd be walking with a bike, a thug come up and you'd hit him with a bike. And the thing is not only did this guy have the right conversations about things like that, but there's actually police reports of the dude doing things like that, like fighting thugs off at his bicycle. So
Beautiful.
To me, that's good information to have. Is not only if you're looking at it from self-defense, you need the art, you need the techniques, but you also need the ingenuity of fighting. And I think that's what that brought to the table. And now my last one's a little geeky, but for me, it's Shonen Jump Dragon Ball Z. You know, reading Dragon Ball Z comics when I was the littlest of kid, that's one of the things that got me into martial arts. You know, that's one of the things that got me excited to train and go show up as a kid is like, I was going to become Goku. I was going to go train, you know? So I read, you know, all the Shonen Jumps, had the subscription, got the new book every month. And that I'd read the book, get excited, train more, and then get to go to class and come be excited to be a martial artist.
That'll motivate dead people. Dragon Ball Z is no joke.
It's called Dragon Ball.
Motivated.
It's essentially think of it like a Japanese comic book series called Dragon Ball Z. And the main character, his whole shtick is that he's a martial artist that loves to fight.
And loves to train. Don't forget that. That was the craziest thing about Dragon Ball Z compared to other, like before that, I read a lot of comics. Sorry, I'm gonna geek out on this one. So, if you see a lot of comic books in America, usually our hero is already strong. Very few people had to train. Batman had to train. That's why a lot of martial arts like Batman. But people like Superman, Wolverine, a lot of these guys already had a superpower. This character had that, but it wasn't enough. Like he ends up getting challenged by other people, kind of like a Superman. He's kind of a Superman, but the people he has to face have trained on top of the fact that they have the same powers or similar powers to Superman, and he has to train. And he trains knuckle push-ups. He does like he has like a Mr. Miyagi sensei, and he's sitting there. He makes him pick the field with his hands. Like he does the whole thing, and he doesn't even know he's an alien until like way later in the series. So he makes him do the training.
Chamber.
Yeah, and later he finds out he's an alien, and then he trains even harder. He's like, "Oh, I'm not human, so now I'm gonna train even harder to try to keep up with like all this other stuff." That's the premise of the show, Anthony. If you ever want to watch anime, I know. Oh man, how are you gonna bring up the discussions we've had offline?
Great.
It's not the kind of stuff the kind of stuff I've sent you. Okay, it has nothing to do with that. There's no tentacles or anything like that. Okay, it's just
okay, good.
Nice, clean fun. All right.
I love it.
So those are your top 5 there, Tim?
Those would be my top 5.
All right,
that was good, man. I liked it, brother.
All right.
That was motivating.
That book.
Oh, you did? You sent it to me.
It's on the messenger.
It's on Messenger. Oh, okay, here. Let me jump on and then we're gonna move on to. Okay, here it is. So it is. All right. So it is. Okay. So the one I just showed you, it is called the Sabaki method. What you just saw, the one I just showed you earlier, that's the revised version, but it's the same book. That's what's going on here. So anybody who was watching and was kind of confused about how to find the book, here's the original cover, Sabaki method, karate in the inner circle. But still, if you look it up the way I just did, you're going to see a revised version, different picture for the cover, but the same information. So just keep that in mind when you look it up.
Okay.
All right. So, Tony, what's your top 5?
Okay, real quick, I want to tell a story that you reminded me of. So there's a superhero that got powerful another way. He took vitamins, and they don't show the episode anymore. And there's a reason why, I think. So Mighty Mouse.
Oh yeah, Mighty
He
Mouse.
went into the medicine. He went into the cabinets in the kitchen, and he got all the vitamins, and he ate all the vitamins. He opened up his mouth and poured all the vitamins down his throat. So all I could get a hold of, because I was a little toddler, all I could find was the bottle of children's aspirin.
Oh no! Oh no!
And I ate all the children's aspirin.
Oh no!
My mother gave me something that made me throw up. I was fine, but
Yeah.
So that's why. Then that's why they don't show that on TV anymore.
So
it makes sense.
it didn't work, and B, vitamins didn't work either. But okay, on to my book.
Hey, you weren't the only one that did that.
I thought I was gonna be like Mighty Mouse. So my books are a little eccentric. So like kind of like Carlos. So my first one is Muhammad Ali Handbook by Dave Zurin. I like all kinds of stuff about Muhammad Ali. He was an incredible technician, incredible strategist, and incredible communicator, and just an interesting dude. And I found myself able to learn a lot about martial arts and a lot of things from him and his life and things that he came up with. And he was an innovator. Another book, highly recommend. I think you guys would love it. It's called By the Sword by Richard Cohen. And it's got a lot of citations to sources, and it talks about the history, the gladiators, musketeers, samurai, swashbucklers, Olympic fencers. It really gives you a lot of information and perspective about the history of violence in humanity, brotherhood and sisterhood, kind of Ohana type of culture among, for example, Olympic fencers, even across different countries. There was this camaraderie, and there were some stories of Germans saving Jews and just interesting things that some fencers were doing for each other during World War II time frame, because they had this relationship, because they were martial artists and they went against each other, sometimes trained with each other. And also it's really interesting the way conflict resolution has evolved in different contexts. And one of the stories that it talks about is how at one time the church would, if you're accused of doing something wrong, the church would appoint 2 champions. One champion would represent the accuser, and then one champion would represent the accused, and then they would fight each other with some type of sword fight, and then whoever won, then it was assumed that side was right, and you were killed. The other side was killed or whatever, punished somehow. Supposedly true story, and it's got all the citations and support. Another book is, you guys are probably familiar with this, Small Circle Jujitsu by Wally J.
Good book, excellent book.
I really like how he discusses concepts, and how he's very honest about the limits of small circle jujitsu in his application, and how he had some failures against some wrestlers and judo practitioners, and he explains the limits of pain compliance approaches to kind of wrist techniques and stuff, because once you cross the threshold, now it's not gonna work anymore, so you have to kind of make sure it's like below the threshold. And then another book, I know Angelo knows about this, Higher Judo by Moshe Feldenkrais. I don't know how you pronounce it. I think he's an Israeli dude that was in France in the 30s through the 50s, and he was very influential in French judo in the 30s. And the book focuses on concepts and situations and techniques in groundwork, but judo at that time included all kinds of things that are now banned from judo, including all kinds of leg types of techniques. And then my final book is Rock, Paper, Scissors, the official strategy guide by Douglas and Graham Walker. And I like it because it's actually it's a little comedic and it seems silly at times, but apparently rock, paper, scissors is like a really big deal. And the way you think through strategy and tactics is really sophisticated. And there's psychological levels to it where you learn how to think paper when you're going to do rock. So that if the other side's reading your mind, they think you're going to do paper. So you learn how to control your tells. It's really, there's some psychological layers to it. There's some, it talks about the Sicilian reasoning. It just talks about a lot of interesting things in a very simplistic way. But I liked it because I thought it was a good metaphor for any type of fighting situation, because we tend to complicate things sometimes. And I think I like simplifying it and thinking in terms of everything has a counter and every counter has a counter. So it translates well to the rock, paper, scissors types of situations. And there's like psychological layers, there's strategies, there's kind of strategies to kind of deal with your own psychology. And it's interesting. There's a lot of comedy woven into it, but it's not long. It's kind of a short book, like 100 and something pages. That's it.
All right.
I
And
loved all the other books.
And then if you guys, I know I hate to give you guys homework, but if you can send me links to all the books you mentioned,
Okay.
if you can send me links, I'll put that in the episode notes. So anybody watching doesn't have to sit there and like throughout the episode, press pause and keep hearing what we said to get that title again. So yeah, if I do my homework right, and I'm sorry to give the guests homework, I normally don't do this shit, but if you just send me a quick, like the titles of the books, and even if it's not a link, just the titles of the books, at least with that, the person can search it online.
I got you, brother. No problem.
Because already between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we said top 5 books, but what we were doing is talking about the similarities, and then we added our other 5 books on top of that. So we kind of recommended 3 everyone has books, and then 5 personal books. That's what we just did here. So we kind of just did 5, 10, 15, 20 books after I give my list right now. One more thing I want to add to one of the books that Tim mentioned about Bartitsu. If you want to hear a great story, and it's a podcast, it's not a book, Daniele Bolelli does Jujitsu Suffragettes with Attitude. And it's about how these women learn jujitsu to keep cops from beating them up as they protest for their rights to vote in 1900s England. It's a great story. It's an awesome story. They learn they learn Bartitsu, and he goes into detail on how these women learn different moves from judo and jiu-jitsu and this art Bartitsu, and the cops would try to crack them on the head with their batons, and they would
beat the shit out of them.
Yeah, essentially they were fighting cops that were trying to keep them from voting in England in the early 1900s, and it was like part of the women's suffrage movement over there. It's a really cool historical story. If you want to check that out, just go to the History on Fire podcast, episode number 92. Now, my top 5. I started revising my top 5 because we all mentioned 3 books that were already on my top of my list. You guys already mentioned the Book of 5 Rings. You mentioned the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and you mentioned Sun Tzu's Art of War. This does seem to be in every martial artist's collection in one way or another, whether it's the top 5 or the bottom 10 or whatever. I haven't met a martial artist who hasn't at least heard of these books, if not read all 3. I am going to reiterate that if you're getting into martial arts, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do is an invaluable resource of techniques and just a broad guideline. Like Tim was saying, just a really broad guideline of things to look at that you're going to need. And especially if you're looking at MMA, just to fool around self-defense. It doesn't have to do with the system. That's what I loved about the book, is people think that when I start saying the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, that I'm a Jeet Kune Do guy, and I'm not. but just the book was written for anybody of any style. That's really what it comes down to. Anybody from any style. Even Eddie Bravo talks about it. Like it helped him. You could talk to, and that's why like they do those interviews about Bruce Lee. And you have 1,000 martial artists saying that how he inspired them, and everyone's like, was it through the movies? Yeah, kind of. Most of the people watched the movies and then read this book, and then when they read this book, it kind of gave them a very broad perspective on how they wanted to approach martial arts. So yeah, that's definitely on the top of the list. Now let's talk about the books that are not at the top of the list, that are the in-between books. I'm going to start my list off with a book called Protecting the Gift by Gavin de Becker. I've mentioned it thousands of times and I'll mention it again. It's a book written by a risk analyst. His job is to assess risk for his clients, and he tries to figure out who's at risk of being assaulted. Specifically, a lot of his clients are women, and he's using research statistics to keep them protected. He runs a company doing this, and through running his company, he ended up becoming an advisor, and he ended up on TV and news networks. People always asking security questions. So he wrote a few books, and this is one of them, and it's about how to keep your children safe from being assaulted. And it's a really dark book. I'm going to put it out there right now because we're not talking about physical assault. Sometimes we're not, but we're talking about sexual assault, which is a hard, difficult, dark place to go to, but very necessary. And that he talks about that in his book. And that's I really do recommend you check it out. It's not a place people want to go to. I recommend having 2 readings because when I read it, I had to take breaks from it because it was just really intense. Like the statistics he throws at you and the things you learn about who your perp is, who the unsub is in these situations, the person who's perpetrating the crimes. It's not a comfortable read. I'll tell you that right now. So a big disclaimer. You're not going to feel comfortable, but you're going to feel safer when you're done because now you know exactly what you're looking for. So there's some great ways to keep your kids safe. There's some great ways to keep your family safe in that book. And it's not necessarily technique. It's not based on techniques. It's based on analyzing some of the stuff Carlos and Claude are talking about analyzing. And we're not talking about so much exits now. We're talking more psychology. So we're talking about people. What kind of people are we looking for? What kind of situations do these things happen in? And how to avoid having our family members be in these situations. And that's the uncomfortable part. And I'm not going to give away what that is because I'll probably not say it right anyway. And I can't wrap it up in a podcast. But if you want to know how to keep your family safe, who to keep them safe from, where to keep them away from, and also the signs of if it's already happening, how to get them out of that situation, this book is the book to have. And I'm just letting you know it's a heavy read ahead of time, but it's really good. And I got through it and I feel safer for it. I feel my family is safer for it. And it has to do more with psychology, not so much physical techniques. But he talks about physical techniques too. His book opens up with a woman who, and he talks about statistics. Like, statistically speaking, a woman being assaulted the way it was in the beginning of the book to catch your attention is not that high. It happens, but not as high. He said normally it's a family member or a friend, and that's what makes it so uncomfortable. But wow. He does start with the situation that scares us the most, the random parking lot assault. And he opens up the book with a woman with her child and everything that happened. Because he's talking about, it's not fiction. So he's talking about, he interviews women and how they survived, and their stories are in the book. And this woman,
so he's telling the whole story.
Yeah, he's telling several anecdotes. So he'll tell you, like, this is what I think, this is what happened. This client said this is what you could have done. This client avoided it, this is how they avoided it. This client didn't, this person didn't survive, this is how they could have survived. And he just kind of breaks it all down using that kind of stuff. So that's why I said it's a heavy book. But yeah, the book opens up with a woman who does not get assaulted and survives, and she doesn't know any martial arts, but the guy attacks her in the car and she fights him off. And then later they break down everything, the science behind how fight or flight kicked in, how she couldn't remember, but she thought she poked his eye out. And then he starts talking about other cases where women didn't succeed, and it was because in their head they were afraid to hurt their assailant. And in this case, the woman did. She said the woman didn't even have time to react. And then later she thought, oh, I probably blinded him for life. And he said, you can't think that way. It's okay. And it's a great book. I'm going to stop it right there because I'm going where I didn't want to go because I want to wrap it up quick. It's a great book. I really recommend you pick it up if you're a martial artist and if you want to protect your family. I really, really recommend it. The next book is Blood in the Cage: The Rise of UFC 1 and the Story of Pat Miletich by L. John Workman. It's a great book. It's written by a guy who doesn't do MMA, so it's fun to see a guy from the outside, like a regular dude, talk about the stuff that we do. And he breaks down the story of Pat Miletich. It's a biography, and he also talks about the rise of UFC. So in there, you're gonna have all the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a lot of the history of karate. Like he just kind of talks about that one point where UFC 1 came out and what was happening and how they got the fighters together. It's a great history book to keep up with combat sports. So if you want to know where and how the UFC got started, this is a great book for that. And it also talks about the early days of the UFC. So it's a good book for that. Another book that, again, so that's one, this is two. Number 3, How Bad Do You Want It by Matt Fitzgerald. This is a good book. It's going to go over sports psychology and how people fight their own mental blocks when competing. And it breaks down a bunch of different sports from marathon to triathlon. The story that comes out of that book that I really love is a story of a guy who became a paraplegic, and he was never really a big, he was never a top athlete. Let me put it that way. He played rugby on the side. He played some sports on the side, and then he lost his arm, and he sat around feeling sorry for himself. And he was getting overweight, and he didn't know what to do. And he was watching TV one day, and he sees people doing a triathlon, and he says, "I want to try that." Mind you, he's missing an arm, and he's like, "I'm going to do it." So he jumps on his bike. Jumps on his bike. He said he has a hard time. He hadn't tried riding his bike with a missing arm yet. He jumps on his bike. He says, "I'm having a hard time balancing." He jumps on his bike, jumps into the nearest lake, starts swimming, almost drowns, survives, goes for his run, comes out, jumps back on his bike, rides to McDonald's, eats 2 Big Macs, and decides that he's going to be a triathlete. And then a year later, he's top triathlete in the world. That's one of the stories in there. Just some great inspirational stories, right? How he went from the guy feeling sorry for himself to being, and he didn't want to compete in the Paralympics. He wanted to compete against other regular athletes. He refused to compete in the paraplegic division. He started winning against other people with 4 limbs. And that's the crazy. So just if you want some great inspirational stories, that's the book to check out, because it's great. It's just got some stories in there that made me want to put a backpack on and start doing ultramarathons. So that's my
a backpack on. We know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's my David Goggins inspirational book there. Another one that was for me was Stop Doing That Shit by Gary John Bishop. Stop Doing That Shit is about self-sabotage, how we stop ourselves and don't reach our full potential because of the little voice in our head that was probably put in there from childhood, and how to deconstruct that voice. How did you end up with that same voice that can push you can also break you? And this book really talks about how to get over yourself, how to tell the signs when maybe outside forces aren't. And by the way, according to this book, and according to a lot of psychology, usually it's not outside forces. Yes, outside forces can stop you from achieving what you want to achieve, but it's up to you to let that happen. Usually it's not. Usually it's your own perception thinking that guy, the reason I didn't get that promotion is because that guy stole it from me, because that guy sabotaged me, because my boss doesn't like me. Maybe your boss does like you, but you think he doesn't like you, so you're being an asshole to him, and it's just reflecting right off of your own personality, off of your own attitude. So that's Stop Doing That Shit. It's a great book. The audio version's awesome. The guy's got a Scottish accent, so he's sitting there yelling at you the whole time, which is kind of motivating for me. So like, I would listen to it in the car, have this Scottish guy yelling, "Stop doing that shit." And you're like, yeah, I need to stop doing that shit. So it's a great book. Check it out. it'll really help. Even if you're not doing martial arts, it's just a great book to help you in business too. And the last one is actually a book that Anthony recommended to me, so I'm surprised he didn't mention his list, was Fast Over 50. So I'm only 42, but I picked up this book called Fast Over 50, which is about triathlon training. But one of the problems I had, if you're a martial artist, and I know Carlos probably has this because he's doing cross training all the time, one of the problems you're going to bump into is overtraining. This is not that common with you regular people. If you're doing a traditional art and you're not doing that much other stuff, maybe you don't have this problem. But I have a big problem wearing a backpack and doing ultra marathons and then going to do jujitsu or fighting the next 2 weeks later. So like I had to figure out, how do I ramp down? I knew this was coming.
It has to be a balance.
Yeah, I knew this was coming. It started with How Bad Do You Want It? That was so inspirational. I started getting into triathlon, marathon.
You're no joke, man. You're always doing all that craziness. Right? I'm like, man, I get up and I'm like, oh, he's running 6,000 miles tonight. I'm like, what? And the next thing you know, he's at the school teaching. I'm like, wow, man, I thought I was crazy. He's crazy. You're crazy. I love it. I love it.
So if you do end up in that situation, and even if you don't, what I do like about Fast Over 50, it gives you a very clear roadmap, even for someone who's never done triathlon, or you have to say not even interested in triathlon, you just want to be in shape as you get older. Yeah. There's a great book for that. Even if you're not older, the way I look at it, if a 50-year-old can do it, I can do it. And the book's it says Fast Over 50, but it starts giving you examples of people in their 70s, 80s doing triathlon.
Oh, wow.
And that's what inspired me when I started doing triathlon, is when I sat there and I was 5 minutes behind an 80-year-old. Like, the guy beat me and I was 5 minutes behind him, right? And I was thinking, it's my first triathlon. It was his fourth, and he started doing triathlon. I asked him, when did you start doing triathlon? He's like, oh, about my 50s, 60s when I started doing triathlon. So it's not so much about getting in a triathlon. It's about the idea that swimming, running, and cycling are things that you can do at any age, at any level of health. So, and I think that other book, How Bad Do You Want It, got me started on that path, because I thought about a guy with only 3 limbs. If a guy with 3 limbs can jump in a lake and go for a run, what's stopping me, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff that I think about, is as you get older, how can I keep moving forward? How can I keep training? Martial arts is hard on the body. I'm always saying that. Martial arts is hard on the body. Eddie Bravo just recently said he's not rolling anymore. He's not rolling anymore. He said, I'm not rolling. If I do roll, it's very specific roles with people that I really trust, right? Yeah. So there will come a point in your life where you're not going to be able to do it. I know, no, not me. No, not me. Yes, all of you. So, if you can find other ways to stay healthy so you can keep doing what you love. And that's why I think Fast Over 50 is a good book, because it really gives you PDFs, graphs on how to scale your training as you get older, how to keep eye on your metabolism and know what your metabolism changes are, so that you don't become someone who was healthy when they were young and unhealthy when they were older. And that's why it's a good book. All right. So that's my top 5. And we're under an hour.
Under an hour, yep.
That's what we were shooting for. Top 5 and under an hour. So hopefully this gave you guys you girls and guys, a good list of books. There's going to be links there. All of the books I mentioned are on audiobooks. I don't know about the books that the other guys mentioned, but audiobooks, you can find quite a few of them. Let me put it that way. You'd be surprised how much stuff you can find in audiobooks. So for those of you who got this far into the podcast and are still thinking, I don't want to read, I like podcasts, I like listening, that's the awesome part about audiobooks. It's just like a podcast. You just pop it in, listen to it in your car. If you drive, if you don't drive, listen to it while you run, listen to it while you're doing something, washing dishes, whatever it is that you're doing in your day that can give you time to just kind of think about something else. Audiobooks are perfect for that. You can get through a whole book. I've been reading about 2 or 3 books a month, just driving my daughter to school. Just every time I drop my daughter off at school, I'm listening to an audiobook on the way home. And that time of the commute, I'm going through that. So just an idea for those of you who say you don't have time to read. I got you. All right, guys. Quick wrap-up statement, starting with Carlos.
No, I love everybody's selection. The Dragon Ball Z one was the best for me. You can't go wrong with Dragon Ball Z, man. That'll motivate a dead
Never.
body. I'm telling you. You know, Team Vegeta for me. And, yeah, and no, everybody's selection was awesome. Knowledge is power. That's all I can say. Keep reading, and you'll discover, you know, new things. Just pick up a book and read. Read.
Absolutely.
Claude?
All the books were great. It gave me a couple ideas for new books to read, but it's the main thing about any of this for people listening to this is whatever speaks to you, doesn't matter if it speaks to anyone else, if it speaks to you, pick it up, learn about it, read it. Like the Tao's, you can do internalize and take what is useful to yourself. You have to explore different philosophies and mindsets and ideas in this martial arts journey, and most of it applies to life in general. Stay fresh on the journey. You know what I mean? Look at everything with open, wide eyes and the eyes of a child. Don't be afraid to explore.
That sounds great.
Tim?
Media makes you, the things that we got inspired by these books coming up. And the thing is physical media is dying out these days. So these books are just important for us to have, but it's also important for us to do things like this and share our books with other people, our kids coming up, the people we're training. Keep passing these books around so they can all get a taste of the Tao, Jeet, and Do, the Book of Five Rings.
Anthony?
I like the idea. Carlos mentioned the book that was psychology related. I like the idea about reading about psychology. I also have a book about how your body remembers stuff, and it really describes the way your different systems are and the different levels in your brain. That's really helpful for life as well as martial arts. And I didn't mention this, but I've read some books about magic, which is applied psychology, but it's really fascinating the things how it ties into things in real life or in martial arts, self-defense. Some of the things that they do. At one, David Blaine, I read his book. I read this other magician's book, and it really kind of opened up my eyes on how to be more perceptive about certain things.
And,
Awesome.
And then for me, as I always say, this podcast is about martial arts and psychology. I do have a master's degree in psychology. So for me, I fight the idea of doing this show and turning it into a lecture. And if you see some of my earlier episodes, you'll see that's why I feel my podcast wasn't doing that great, was because I'd go up here and I'd go up with research articles and just I thought people would be interested in that, and it turns out it was just me and maybe two other people. So but I am gonna say, if you notice a pattern here with what everyone just said, books on psychology, what he just said, mentalism. I've picked up a few books on mentalists and mentalism, also known as dark psychology, and so there's a book called Dark Psychology if you want to check that out. But the great part about this stuff is you can apply it to anything. You can apply it to martial arts, but you can apply it to anything in and outside of martial arts. And if you want to become a martial artist, psychology helps you. If you want to get better, if you want to do better at work, psychology helps you with that too. And it helps you really build that bridge between all that success you've had in martial arts into the rest of your life, which is the title of another podcast. But those books really can help you with that. So one of these episodes, once a week. Thanks for checking it out. If you like what you heard, share with your friends, hit like and subscribe, and we'll catch you all next time.